Star blessings, beloveds. Let's talk about the new moon in Pisces, which is literally just about an hour and a half away. I'm a little bit late to jump on with it, but the reason for that is because I was feeling very much in the balsamic moon phase, which is where it still is at the moment. Balsamic phase is the one just before the new one. So I've just been in this zone with the balsamic moon phase, just reflecting on lots of different things. Also reflecting on this new moon and just how important it actually is, how powerful it is. And the reason for that is because of the themes that are surrounding it by other planetary alignments. And so it is a new moon. It's not a solar eclipse, which is a new moon as well. So it's not an eclipse, it's a regular new moon, as it were. But it's very far from regular because of the surrounding themes that are going to take place as part of this particular lunation cycle. So we're entering what's commonly referred to as Pisces season. And this is a very unique Pisces season for a couple of very specific reasons, which I will point to and explain in a moment. And I'm only going to point to those themes as a reference to give greater depth to this new moon reading. And then I will later come back and address those themes in greater depth in separate videos. And most of you will be aware of what I'm about to mention anyway, to some extent. But before I begin, I just want to read a quote that I remembered I had written a few years ago, and I found it. And it's just so appropriate for the portal of Pisces and Neptune and 12th house. And it is the more transcendent understanding and wisdom of the archetype of Pisces. And it should be our goal, really, to be working towards this as best as we can through our heart center. So here is the quote, and it's by Dane Rudhyar, one of my favorite astrologers. Neptune collects the perfume of all flowers, the halos of all sanctity, of all holy men, the radiant glow of all synthetic understanding, the wisdom of all the wise, and out of it, it makes the substance for a new universal manifestation of being, for that body of light, which is the true home of the soul. So that's a quote by Dane Rudhyar, which we could meditate on for hours, really, or days or years, whatever. It's just such a powerful description of that transcended level of Pisces, and that is what we are stepping into with this new moon. The sun's just ingressing into Pisces as we speak. There's going to be the new moon in a couple of hours, and there's quite a few things going on surrounding this lunation cycle, as I said, which I'd like to point to. Let me just turn off this screen so that we don't get any distractions. So let's begin by bringing up the chart and start looking at some visuals. I've got a few interesting things to point to today, which will be how can I put it? In the bigger picture, it's really understanding the nature of the soul, the nature of duality in which we live in, where everything exists, both light and shadow, both good and evil, just to use very simple terminology. The matter of goodness or evilness derives from the same one source. Everything is born from the one source. And we know that particularly in, let's say, one of the main religions such as Christianity, which has been distorted over a very long period of time relative to the essence of the scriptures, based on control, based on ulterior objectives and so forth. The true essence of the Christ consciousness, the Christ body of light, is something inherently contained within all of us. And it doesn't come from any one religion. It just comes from the truth that exists within every single one of us. So when we are thinking about Pisces, which is a symbol for Christ as well, the two fish swimming in opposite directions bound by a cord, is a metaphor to help us understand the, again, just to use simple language, the higher self and the lower self. So you've got two fish swimming in opposite directions, meaning one fish is reflective of the soul and the other fish is reflective of personality, and they're bound by a cord. And the whole evolution of the portal of Pisces is the transcendence of the personality and the ego, which in evolutionary terms would be described as what's called separating desires. There is a soul which is infinite, which is immutable consciousness, meaning it can never be destroyed, but only changing form. And every incarnation, it is born with particular desires that's separated from its source, which equals life experiences. And within that paradigm and that realm, there are choices that are made. The matter of free will is 100% true and pretty much there for every single one of us, every time the soul incarnates. So the separating desires, as they are termed, are the ones that take us further away from source. And the concept of evil, we could say, is wrapped up or embodied somehow in those separating desires, obviously at varying degrees. Now, making a choice to go this way doesn't mean that it's an evil act necessarily. However, there are some choices that people make that take it in that direction that would be defined as an evil act. Now, I'm bringing this up because I recently purchased this book, Lucifer, and I'm only just starting to read it. And I did mention on my Facebook page that I'm going to do a video on it, which I will. But the reason I even bought the book is, first of all, it was on my mind for a couple of years. Now, I know I'm detracting from the new moon in Pisces, but I'll get back to it for those of you that are hanging for the reading of new moon in Pisces, because this is all relevant, because the asteroid Lucifer is very prominent at the moment. And so I wanted to buy this book a couple of years ago, and then just recently I've briefly touched on this, I had a particular experience that it just felt like a Lucifer energy around me. And so I looked up where the asteroid was, and relative to my own birth chart, where it was transiting, and the story that played out and where the asteroid was, it could not be more literal. So it's actually one of my discoveries for my own self and my own chart that will be up there in the top 10 relative to an astrological correspondence to a life event that was just so literal, and a very difficult period as well. So subsequently, I started looking at the transit of Lucifer, and also relative to what's been happening in the world, as it were. And because I'm involved in social media, and that's primarily because I share, my astrological content and so forth, thoughts, reflections, readings on new moons, full moons, etc. I'm very engaged with social media, and sometimes I absolutely hate it, to be honest with you, because there's just the dark web, the dark side. which is part of life, you know, the dark and the light, duality, I find it extremely draining. And I, you know, go through many periods where I need to clear and withdraw, completely isolate. And I've got some strong placements in my 12th house, so I don't find that difficult to do. In fact, I find it more difficult to come back out and engage with the world, as it were. I find it more comfortable to be in my own solace and sacred sanctuary, which is my home. And that's, again, because I've got very strong placements in my 4th house as well. So 2 water houses, 4 and 12, are really prominent in my chart, even though I'm sun sign in Aries, right? So one thing I got to, I mean, I had this in my mind from some time ago, but I'm just becoming a lot more clear about it now. First of all, if we go back to biblical scriptures, you know, Lucifer was the referred to as the fallen angel, right? He was right up there at a very high rank, as it were, extremely intelligent, extremely beautiful. And the separating desires, let's say, led him, let's just say it's a him, as in gender, him, her, to fall from grace, as it were, because of the sheer nature of the personality, which can be based on greed and, you know, very personal objectives, okay, that fundamentally end up speaking to what we'd call separating desires, which is moving away from God. Separating desires is moving away from God. If you don't like that word, replace it with source or divinity or goddess. Doesn't really matter. The source is the source. It doesn't matter what name us humans associate with it. That's just an identity. It's just a name. It's just language. Language is important, though, and it carries a lot of energy behind it, such as words carry energy behind them as well. I understand that. But when you go to the absolute root, core essence of all things, it's just the source of all things, right? So the fall of that particular archangel, which we know as Lucifer, it also corresponds to the Sun-Venus conjunction, which we understand as the Venus star point, hence the pentagram that is created by those 5 Venus star points, which is the pentagram. The pentagram comes from the Greek word pende, which means 5, and it's 5 points, right? 5 Venus star points that create the pentagram, which, when is inverted, has been known to have been used in the darker side of life, as it were, relative to worship of satanic portals and perceptions and so forth. And some people might be very uncomfortable about this material, and that's okay. If you are, you can tune out, but it is a part of life. And the more we don't recognize it for what it is or understand it, the more we're going to project it outside of ourselves and ultimately slow down, if you like, our ability to integrate and evolve, because all dark and light exist within every single one of us, no matter what. And what I've noticed through social media, which is why I brought the social media component up, is that particularly over the last few months, and particularly over the last few weeks especially, there's been so much talk, perception, projection, identification with this experience in life that is being cracked open. And it's very much Pluto in Capricorn coming to the end of the journey of Pluto. Look at Pluto in Capricorn, it's at 29 degrees, right at the end. So there's an extremely intensified process of what everything that Pluto in Capricorn has meant. There's an intensified process that we are encountering at the moment and have been for a little while. And so the exposure in the world of, I'll call it Neptune, because it is Neptune from the from the lowest level, which is the world of glamour. The world of glamour, which is Hollywood, is the lowest form of the manifestation of Neptune, which is just based on pure self-absorption and greed. And so there's been a lot of things circulating in the media about performers selling their soul to the devil and so on and so forth, and performances taking place that are supposed to clearly represent rituals and worship to the dark side. Now, I'm not here to dispute whether that's true or not. That's what's happening. That's what people are perceiving. That's how people are identifying it, and so forth. I think it's actually so connected to Pluto in Capricorn, and we're going to see a completely different level of this when Pluto gets into Aquarius. So a lot of the exposure that's gone on with Pluto in Capricorn since 2008 has largely had to do with the Saturnian systems that, let's just say, do not operate from a conscious, authentic place that serves humanity, but rather operates from a place that is based on, again, the more unconscious lower side of Saturn, Kronos, who, when you go back to his mythology, swallowed his children for fear of ever being overtaken or controlled by them. So there's this level of Saturn that speaks to a tremendous, I would use the word obsession, of needing to control everything, right? So we have the asteroid Lucifer is currently in Aquarius, so it's hanging around here. It's actually quite late Aquarius. It's about 21 Aquarius at the moment. So in the last, since around just after mid last year sometime, I think it was, or maybe just a few, about 4 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, Lucifer was in Capricorn. So, you know, it's been tracking this journey in, well, we can go back as far as Sagittarius, because that is a sign that I would also include. Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, they are the signs that we would really associate with society, humanity, universal, collective themes, okay, that play out on that external level. So we've had Lucifer tracking Sagittarius, Capricorn, so it's caught up to Pluto. It's made its conjunction to Pluto, which would have been just a couple of months ago. And if you think about it, all that stuff that's going on in the media relative to celebrities and Hollywood singers, actors, and so on and so forth, Lucifer has been conjunct Pluto, traveling through Aquarius of late, and at the moment at 21 of Aquarius. And this is so interesting to me, by the 11th of March, the asteroid Lucifer is going to ingress into Pisces, which is just a couple of days after Saturn ingresses into Pisces. So they're going to catch up. Now let's just go back a minute. I just wanted to say, and when I come back and talk about this book, which I will, I'll go into greater depth about this, but just remember that Lucifer, in its essence, the word transfers to light, okay? It's the light, actually. And so when we relate it to the Sun-Venus conjunction, the pentagram, the Venus star points, think about it like this. Lucifer fell from grace, as it were, because that entity or that energy decided to make very specific choices that separate it from its source. And it sort of dove into the dark, the earth plane, and has this life, this presence here on this earth plane as a dark force. Its origin is of light, but it's transcended, but not transcended. It's gone the other way, right, by diving into the dark. Okay. And when you think about the Sun-Venus conjunction, okay, we've got the morning star and we've got the evening star. And that journey of the morning and evening star is, the morning star is the retrograde cycle of Venus, and the evening star is the direct cycle. And in the myth of Inanna, which is the story of Venus, she goes through this journey of going into the underworld, where she meets the dark sister, Ereshkigal. That story is a reflection connecting to the asteroid Lucifer. When you go to the absolute origin zone, this is a very deep subject and it's very complex, but when you go to the origins, it all ties into the divine feminine being suppressed thousands of years ago, and then subsequently being projected as demonic on the earth plane, as it were. When you think about figures like Lilith, for example, the goddess Lilith, who's often depicted as a demonic goddess, you know, in her essence, she's not a demonic goddess at all. So there's been this suppression and subsequent projection, right? And this all ties into Lucifer and the Sun-Venus conjunction, which creates the pentagram, which is just an expression of the divine feminine that has been suffocated and suppressed, internalized and projected through the dark as opposed to the light. And it's also what corresponds to the specific journey that Venus goes through when she goes into the underworld, where she ultimately dies. She's ultimately killed by her sister, and then she is reborn. So all of this is connected, okay? But when it comes to the asteroid Lucifer, and as per, this is Jeffrey Wolf Green's book, by the way, and I think he's the only one that's, I could be wrong, but I think he's the only one that's really written an actual book on this asteroid. And he's got quite a few case studies in there, case studies of individuals and case studies of world events that show us very clearly what the asteroid Lucifer was doing at the time of a particular event. And one of the examples he's got in there is of a community, a group of people that that have acted in a way of suicide bombers and things of that nature, that have claimed that they were told by God that they had to perform those acts, for instance. And Lucifer was quite prominent in the chart of that particular event, for instance. There's been many of those, and I can't quite recall which specific one he's talking about there, but I'll talk about it when I do a video on the book. Now, why am I bringing all this up in the new moon? Well, I think it's important to think about as a background kind of theme that seems to have such a prominent voice in today's society and culture based on what's happening in the world. Everything from everything from, you know, the narrative that began 3 years ago to people being exposed for deliberately lying, people being taken to court for, you know, censorship over truth. And, you know, it's like pick a number and get in line, as in terms of how many things there are to actually address. And you know, the scope of this video is not intended for that conversation, but I just want to bring it up in the larger sort of context of everything that's going on. And I feel more so that when Lucifer ingresses into Pisces and then Saturn ingresses into Pisces, that conjunction is going to be pretty important relative to the absolute lies and illusions that are presented or projected. So stay tuned for that, because there's a lot more you're going to see and hear. And I'll come back and address that separately. So let's go into the new moon. There it is, there at 1 degree, 22 minutes of Pisces. It's interesting that this new moon, if you look at this chart, don't worry about the location. Wherever you are, obviously the location of the planets will change, but the shape will not change. Everything will be in the exact same position, but in different houses depending on the location. So we're not interested in the houses here, because this is based for Melbourne. We're just interested in the shape. And we can see that there's, a large body of concentrated energies just here on the one side. And outside of this bundle energy is, well, Uranus is it's kind of, it's a bit touch and go. It's kind of there with this bunch, but it's sort of trying to move away, but it's still within range of the North Node. And so for that reason, I would say it's still kind of there. So really then it's Mars that's out there on his own, doing his own thing, which is very Mars-like. Anyway, Mars is about our own assertive personal action and passion and direction and so on and so forth. So Mars is out here doing his own thing. And then you've got all these guys and ladies over here all bundled up together, really kind of influencing each other in some kind of way. And the midpoint of the sun and moon, meaning the new moon, is actually Pluto and, Pluto and Vesta. So there's Vesta, the goddess Vesta, recently went into Aries. And there's Pluto at the last degree of Capricorn. So this new moon sits, hello Coco, this new moon sits right at the midpoint of Pluto and Vesta. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, it could mean a lot of different things. But one thing I will say is that the reason I'm even pointing it out is because both Vesta and Pluto have a specific correlation to the soul. Vesta is one of those goddesses, one of those archetypes that really speaks to the soul work that we do. And Pluto in evolutionary astrology is the soul. So here we have a new moon contained, held together by the energies at the exact midpoint of two bodies that speak to the soul. And the new moon is in Pisces, which is also an archetype that speaks to the soul as well. So it's quite an interesting energy. Now, this lunation cycle starts on the 20th of February, 19th if you are Northern Hemisphere. And it's the beginning of Pisces season. And then as this lunation cycle continues through into the month of March, what we're going to see is two incredibly powerful transitions with two planets. One with Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, which is on the 24th of March, and Saturn ingressing into Pisces on the 8th of March. Now, we haven't had a new moon in Pisces, a Pisces season, with the ingression of those two planets occurring within this lunation cycle for a very long time. The last time Saturn ingressed into Pisces was 29 years ago. The last time Pluto ingressed into Aquarius was 248 years ago. So this lunation cycle is deeply connected to huge shifts in consciousness within the collective sphere at this point in time. So it's quite a powerful new moon. Also, Actually, let's just talk a little bit about Pisces. So Pisces is such a complex archetype. I've said this numerous times. Virgo, Scorpio, and Pisces are the three most complex signs in the zodiac. They all speak to an aspect of the ego dying, being reborn and being transcended, as it were. They are deeply complex archetypes, those three. So when we get to Pisces, there's a sense, you could say, of knowing within ourselves that we must come to some position of surrender of our own personal selfish will in terms of our actions. And the thing that is calling us is Source to remind us of the unity of the whole human family, the whole soul family. It's about the deep connection to the source of life and all of life, and that we are a part of that, and trying to be separate of it, we miss out on a lot. We lose a lot. We cannot live in this world as a complete separate entity, just doing our complete own thing, because nothing is separate. So the new moon in Pisces is a reminder of that exact thing, of the fact that we all come from the one source, we all return to the one source. And we go through processes in life where we may have to surrender or give something up or sacrifice something for the greater good, for enabling the source, unity, truth, Pisces, Neptune, 12th house, to be to allow that channel to filter through in our actions, in how we are living, in how we are thinking, in how we are loving, in how we are allowing our heart to give, right? To give love, to receive love. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about a more transcendent love that is inclusive as opposed to exclusive. So Pisces takes us through these sorts of realms, the mystical, the inspired, the dream states, the disillusionment, the disappointment, the states of agony and ecstasy, the two fish swimming in opposite direction, one's in bliss, one's in agony. Because this third dimension reality has got so much pain and suffering and agony within it, not because of anybody creating it in that way necessarily, but rather all of us creating it in that way. All of us, every single one of us, have contributed to the reality that we see before us today. Whether we care to admit that or not, whether we understand that or not, is irrelevant. It's just a pure fact. It's just based on the fact that each soul, when it incarnates, it chooses specific actions. It chooses specific pathways. Each of those actions and pathways will either separate it further from its source, or will bring it back closer to its source. And within that whole mix exists everything from good to evil to absolutely everything. So Pisces can take us into that field of consciousness that is more fluid, that because Pisces has no boundaries, right? No structure, no form, no boundaries. It's completely fluid. And within that, again, can exist dark and light as well, because in the physical form specifically, we live in a world of duality, and Pisces is a dual sign as well. So it's up to us how we navigate through this and how we try our best to dispel the temptation of the illusion of the world of glamour in whatever form that appears, shows up, or our desires around that. I mean, really, it's just the ego, the personality wanting its own way, wanting to achieve what it wants, how it wants it, to the exclusion of the source, as it were. So sometimes when we go through a Pisces season, or when you're going through transits through the 12th house, or you are having Neptune transits to some personal planets in your chart, there can be this experience of isolation, feeling victimized, hospitalization, imprisonment. Those are all typical themes. And sometimes those mundane experiences in hospitalization, imprisonment, isolation, and so forth, can typically occur because the archetype of Pisces, Neptune, 12th house, is unconscious. And when we are not conscious of the source that is calling us to it in every moment, and we take a decision that's a complete opposite of that, well, when there's a strong Piscean portal open, there is an asking for us to be able to surrender our own personal will, to align ourselves further with source, with our highest will, so that the choices we make are not just for our own selfish purposes, right? And when we don't do that, when we just take the complete opposite, then we can experience periods where we might feel unwell and be hospitalized, or we might feel isolated or victimized. And part of the reason that happens is because there's a necessity for us to be in a position where we are kind of so squeezed into a space where we are virtually forced to start to realize and look at things from a broader picture, and not just from our own selfish purposes. It's a deeply complex subject, and one that some people might not understand. But when I talk about a new moon or a full moon, I like to delve a little bit deeper, rather than just saying, oh, it's a new moon in Pisces, set your intentions and plant your dream and off you go. I mean, that's kind of like yeah, well, it's mainstream astrology, really, isn't it? Coffee magazines on the coffee table will tell you that. So it's just an invitation to. Got a very anxious dog next door, and I believe that animals are so in tune with their owners' unconscious everything, that they mirror that and they express that. It's really interesting. Anyway, I've got a neighbor she's got so much anxiety, and the dog just mirrors exactly that. Sorry to sidetrack. Okay. So yeah, it's just an invitation to think about the Pisces energy from a more transcendent perspective, from a more transcendent level, and how you might use that or step into that portal in a way that helps you actually come closer to source, as it were, by removing what we'd call separating desires, and by understanding that you are not alone, you are part of everything, you are part of source, and that none of us are here to be disconnected from each other and from source. But the the free will is given to every single soul to make those choices. And there's no, right or wrong in that necessarily. It's just how source has, I suppose, created itself, as it were. We are just a reflection of source experiencing itself. So it's very, very, very tricky when you try to understand that on an intellectual, logical level. There's no logic in it. You have to really employ your right brain, intuition, and feel your way into the possibilities of the eternity of who you are. So the other things that I also want to point to is Venus, our beautiful goddess Venus, who's been traversing through Pisces. And it's been a really interesting journey for me because I've got Venus in Pisces. So I've had this Venus return. And I got a bit lost in my Venus in Pisces because there's a particular person in my life who I have a particular connection with from a past life. And Venus in Pisces can be in certain ways with certain people, it can be really taken through the ringer, just completely drained because of the sheer goodness that Venus in Pisces is prepared to give. She's prepared to sacrifice so much for someone she loves, for instance. And the last few weeks while Venus has been in Pisces, I've found myself just giving so much on every single level to a particular individual who will just take and take and take and take and take. And the last couple of days, it just dawned on me just how much I was giving and how much that was, it was taking away from me. It was draining me so much because it wasn't being reciprocated in any way. And I'm not blaming that person. That's my issue with boundaries. Venus in Pisces has no boundaries. It's very difficult. So the last couple of days I've been thinking, shit, I love Venus in Pisces. I love a lot of the experiences I feel I've had and that I have with every Venus return. And every Venus return for me from last year and this year and next year, I've got a Venus return with Neptune right there. So there's been enormous sort of giving and sacrifice and really helping a particular individual. And the question then becomes, well, I'm helping because my heart is in the right place, but I'm also hindering because I'm not allowing that person to take responsibility for the things that they need to take responsibility for, because I'm always there to rescue them. So it's been a very draining process for me, and once again, a process that I'm still obviously needing to grow further from. And I was thinking about it last night and today, and I thought, I'm kind of glad Venus is about to go into Aries. And she goes into Aries, I think, probably about an hour after the new moon. About an hour it is. So I'm kind of relieved about that, even though Venus in Aries is in her detrimental position relative to essential dignities and abilities. So there's a lot of different ways you can view a planet in the sign. It is important to note when a planet is in dignity or debility. I think that holds a lot of value, actually. And when you understand that, you can work with that energy and the limitations that it poses, as it were. But on the other hand, Venus in Aries has got that beautiful, fierce warrior goddess energy speaking through her. And it can be a time where we can really focus on some self-love, Aries self, Venus love, right? Just to put it very simply. And further to that, she's going to also catch up to Jupiter in Aries and form a conjunction in a few days' time. Let's see, I think I've got it noted. On the 1st of March is the exact conjunction between Jupiter and Venus, but in effect, relative to an applying conjunction and the portal of energy being open, in about an hour's time after the new moon, when Venus goes into Aries, she's even in a conjunction with Jupiter at the moment, just out of sign. When she goes into Aries in an hour's time, she's absolutely conjunct Jupiter in the same sign as well. So the conjunction of this energy takes effect really from today, and will be there till the 1st of March and even a couple of days after that. So we've got, about, say about 2 weeks' time of this beautiful Venus-Jupiter portal of energy, which is the two benefics aligning together in the archetype of Aries. And first of all, on an astronomical level, in the night sky, if you can get a chance to see the conjunction between Jupiter and Venus, it is one of the most beautiful visual, magical, mystical phenomena that our physical eyes can witness when you look into the sky and see them together. Outside of that, Venus moon is the other most beautiful one. So you've got two benefics lining up, in the sign of Aries. And as I said, Venus is in her detriment, but we can use that energy in a way to maybe refocus back on ourselves. If the journey of Venus in Pisces has taken you to a very sort of imbalanced extent of how much you've sacrificed or given, which that's been me. So I need to now refocus my energy back on myself, because I've just given way too much, right? So Venus in Aries is going to help me get a little bit back on track with just, pouring some of that energy back into my own self. Because as much as it is necessary, beautiful, powerful, cathartic to help and to give to others, we also need to have a balance about that and good, clear boundaries about it, because we just simply become depleted. And if you are depleted, then you're really no good to anybody, let alone yourself. So it is important to always check back in with ourselves and just see how far is that band being stretched out. And for me, it went really far. And now I'm starting to pull it back in, as it were. So Venus in Aries can be a nice reminder of self-care and self-love. Now, Venus in Aries can also be a really selfish sort of energy that has absolute no ability to relate and share. I've seen that in people who've got Venus in Aries. So, there's a lot of different expressions. But, I just want to sort of approach it from a more optimistic, transcendent level with Venus in Aries, which would just be pouring some love back into your own self, into your own soul. So that's coming up, as I said, over the next 2 weeks. That's what's in play now. What else have we got with this chart? The other thing that I thought was really interesting as well is that by the 2nd of March, Hygeia will be at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And this conjunction is fundamental, so important and so powerful. There's 2 reasons for that. First reason is that in this story that's been playing out on the Earth plane the last 3 years, Hygeia, and I've spoken about this several times, Hygeia has been quite a prominent archetype in the storyline. And when Pluto ingresses into Aquarius, the only thing that is there in terms of a traditional aspect to Pluto is Hygeia. have a look at when Pluto ingresses into Aquarius and put Hygeia into the chart if you don't use Hygeia, who is the goddess of health, healing, hygiene, mentors, and so forth. But also speaks to disease and things like that as well. Things that can go wrong in the context of plagues and terrible things like that on the human level in this 3D reality. So she's going to be conjunct Pluto in Aquarius when Pluto first just begins to touch that archetype. She's the only thing there. We can't ignore that. That's pretty profound and pretty important. But you know, it's a little bit concerning as well from the point of view of the amount of we kind of need to talk about it because it's just a fact. There's a lot of people dying. A lot of people dying. I mean, I just heard that in the UK at the moment, you know, this is the deaths that are sort of documented of late. We're talking like London, which isn't a big place, but anyway, it's over 50,000 deaths. Connecting to that thing that was put into people's bodies. So we've got a problem. And with Pluto and Hygeia in Aquarius, you know, I'm a little bit concerned about that. But I'll come back and talk about that. I mean, you can obviously use your imagination, see where that's going, right? I mean, Pluto in Aquarius is going to have the weirdest shit that you've ever seen in your lifetime is from here on. The last 3 years have been the precursor for what's to come. That's one level of the interpretation of the third dimension, and we can't ignore it, we can't suppress it, we can't deny it, but we don't have to identify with it either, nor be a part of it. There are ways of not being a part of it. And that's through the choices that we make and the things that we choose to focus our energy into as well. So, you know, everything on a more bigger picture level does come down to our soul's desires and the choices that we make as a result of that. And really, the picture that we are witnessing is just a fractured manifestation of the ego consciousness in humanity that has just pushed it so far. The ego is just kind of annihilating itself, as it were. And there's a big, deep preparation for a new earth, new life, new consciousness, new awareness, but we can't expect to get to that place, as it were, and that's a journey unto itself. It's not like we arrive there and bang, we're just there automatically overnight. Nothing happens overnight. Everything is a gradual process in evolution, right? And so we're just at that real critical stage, and have been for some time, where things need to be completely dismantled before they can be rebuilt. And we are all contributing in that process, whether we are aware of it or not, and have been for a long time. So there is power in what we choose. And the greatest power is the power of remembering who you are and being aligned with Source. It's not a religious thing. It's not a religious is probably the best word. Yeah, it's not I'm not talking about religion. We could talk about religion for eons. But I'm just merely speaking to, if you have a sense within yourself that there is something about you that is deeper and bigger than just your physical body and your name, what you do. If you have this sense that there is something much bigger and deeper within you, where you have little glimpses or little moments, feelings about that, a connection to that, whether it's through various practices you do, or whether it's through the things that you focus on, or dreams or feelings you have. Doesn't matter how it arrives for you, or how it shows up, or how you connect to it. But if you have that sense, then you understand that it's not just about you, and that you are connected to everybody. That is the case for all of us. And so what the hell are we doing here? What are we trying to get to? You know, what are we trying to reach? I think we are just at a point from that collective perspective where we are, as a collective human family, from the ego personality level. As I said, personality is just it's going through a complete annihilation. It has to, because it's just gone fucking too far, you know, in its greed. It has to be peeled back, and that's what's happening on a collective stage. And so you can imagine over thousands of years how much stuff has been suppressed or hidden, you know, through religion, culture, society, government, whatever, you know, all the strands that create this picture we call life. The amount of things that have been out of our view, as it were, out of our conscious understanding, is all fucking bubbling up, and it's just exploding like there's a collective volcano that's just erupting, you know, through the earth, and just dismantling everything. So if that is true, which I think it is, it's no wonder that we are seeing the chaos that we are seeing. You know, you can't have things dismantled with no debris, with no mess around it. But there's always cleanup after that, right? And then there's always the rebirth, if you like. But that takes time. You know, it's like pulling out a tree, you know, from the earth, and then replanting something. That tree is not going to grow overnight, is it? You know, each plant is different, of course, but I'm just using a tree as a bigger picture example. It takes time, you know. So think about the roots that are buried deep within this earth plane, the grids all around it, spiritually, in the earth herself. Just there's so much that's been hidden from us that's now just erupting through this collective volcano. That's shocking to a lot of people, and to some it's like, well, I knew this was coming, kind of thing, right? And it doesn't even matter whether you're there or whether you're here. It's fucking happening either way, right? That's all there is to it. So I guess it's just about taking one day at a time and remembering who you really are, and which is, what is that? It's soul. It's your infinite source nature, and every experience, every wave of thing that comes through is just always an opportunity for us to realign. That's it. That's all it is. Realign. Now, the resistance to the realignment is typically going to be seen as, you know, forces and storylines and things like that, holding the complete opposite position. Obviously, it cannot be any other way. But, you know, there's too much light that's breaking through on the darkness, you know. There's just too much light now. So there's too much that's being seen, which is the necessary part of this process in collective evolution. So we can say that it's evil, we can say that person's evil, we can say that situation's evil, etc. And it is on one hand, it absolutely is. No one can deny that, right? With certain acts and so forth. But then on the other hand, it's also the matter of people being completely fucking unconscious with what they're doing. So what we are doing as a human family is we're trying to balance that shit out. And to balance that out, as I said, there's a collective volcano that's erupting, and that's going to spew out everything. That's what we're seeing. So our place in that is important, though. Our level of understanding and awareness. Try not to identify with it too much, because when we identify with something, we are projecting something unconscious within ourselves. So it's different to be aware of something, to notice it, to be aware, to observe it. That's one thing. And to have an identification with it and a judgment and whatever is another thing again. So anyway, this is a deep conversation. There's many different layers of levels. I will come back to talk about Saturn in Pisces, because that's going to be an absolute trip, I think. And especially since Lucifer, the asteroid Lucifer, is going to form this conjunction to Saturn in Pisces, literally just days apart of Saturn moving into Pisces. This is all in the month of March, and you've got Pluto moving into Aquarius. Yeah, there's some weird things that are yet to come. As I said, what's been happening is a precursor. Now, just to go back to this gorgeous new moon in Pisces, I guess my suggestion with it would be, how might you use this cycle in a way? Well, once again, actually not once again, but I forgot to mention, where does the new moon land in the chart? That area of your chart is where you would associate this energy in this lunation cycle and draw from that field to connect with this energy and this lunation cycle. So each house in the chart obviously represents various components of life, and multiple layers as well for each house. So when you're thinking about it in that context, whatever house it's in, it's still important to think about it from a bigger picture perspective. And how might you create a month, let's say, because the lunation cycle is for a month, how this next month, you could say, this current lunation cycle for the next 4 weeks, how might you step into that portal of Pisces, which is unifying with everything, through that house of where the new moon would be. So that the house is very, very important, because it's going to describe the field, but the overall intention is going to come through the new moon, which is in Pisces. So there is something about perhaps needing to have to sacrifice something about our own personal desires, so that we can actually align with the bigger purpose, with the unity of all creation. And, you know, from a creative, spiritual, practicing spiritual methods, rituals, creative, artistic processes and so forth, this is a very fertile lunation cycle, and it happens at, you know, the 1st degree of Pisces, so it's a very new energy as well. And it is very new because Saturn's going to ingress into Pisces through this cycle, and Pluto is going to ingress into Aquarius through this cycle. So there's something a lot bigger playing out here than just your regular little moon in Pisces. The Sabian symbol for 2 degrees of Pisces, it's a little bit daunting, if I'm going to be honest, but it is also a way of being prepared for things as well. It's actually, well, I might as well read it. Sometimes the Sabian symbols will be spot on, and sometimes they'll be off the mark. So don't take it as gospel, perhaps take it as a background potential theme that just might give a bit of information to you for your own preparation. And the symbol is this: it's a squirrel hiding from hunters. Keynote: the individual's need both to ensure his future subsistence and to protect himself from aggressive social elements. So you can interpret that as you will based on how you connect to that particular statement. But what it's talking about is the squirrel not only has to hide and store food for the winter, but to be on the lookout for the dangers involved in gathering his this food supply. Social processes always cast strong shadows. The individual is never certain of being safe among his fellow men. Once the process of individualization, with its negative aspects, competition, social aggression and greed, forces the breakdown of the organic tribal state of mankind during the archaic ages. Now, there's a lot of shit going on. I mean, in Sri Lanka, there's absolute mayhem going on. Mayhem. First of all, we had the earthquakes in Syria and Turkey. It's horrific what those souls are going through. Horrific. My heart goes out to all those souls there. Then in Sri Lanka, I just saw a couple of days ago, there's absolute anarchy and chaos going on there because there's no food, there's no electricity, there's no petrol. Well, there's limited petrol. Like, people are waiting at a petrol station for 6 hours in their car to just get a little bit of petrol. There's hardly any food in stores. Most stores have closed down. People are lucky to eat once a day. You know, it's almost, what's the word? Just forgotten the word. But anyway, there's, serious things are going on all around the world. And once again, this speaks to this collective volcano that I was talking about, where things are just being spewed up. But there is, unfortunately, there is going to be, a lot of loss, a lot of suffering that we will witness or experience, It's just, unfortunately, how it is. So that might not sound too inspiring, but, it is a reality, and it's important to be aware of what's going on and how we might be able to either help and also protect ourselves as well. It's important to protect ourselves on every level, spiritually, emotionally, on every level, and also help where we can. Pisces season, new moon in Pisces, it's about giving. So think about who you might be able to help or give to, not to the extent where you burn yourself out. Remember, the balance has to be there as well. You don't want to be a martyr or a victim. You want to choose something consciously because it is helpful both for you and that person, or for you and that group. Now, for you, it might be helpful because it could just be a feeling like it feels good to give something back to that person or to that community, whatever it is. none of us are separate from each other as much as we think we are. So the more we can unite, the more we will rise through this collective diabolical narrative and although on the other hand necessary transformation as well, because as I said, shit has to break down and be annihilated before it can be rebuilt. But we need to come together as opposed to be divided. And the ultimate coming together, as it were, unity, is through Pisces. Because if you think about the 12th house, which is Pisces, which is Neptune, that is the unity of everything. Everything is contained within the archetype of Pisces. Every other sign, house, planet is a composite of 12th house Pisces, Neptune. Everything, because everything is contained in Pisces. Even that logically tells us that nothing is disconnected. And we all come back to that. We come from that and then we come back to that. So anyway, I think that's probably enough for today. I'll see you guys very soon with more. Now, I did mention that I will run the Venus Star Point workshop again. I did it about a year ago and webinar, and I'll run it again. There's a few people interested. I've got a few emails by some people, and I will get back to all of you. I'm just waiting for, well, I waited to really just announce it one more time again, so I can just get a small little group. So if you're interested in that, just send me an email and let me know. So it's a webinar that will go for about 3 hours or so. That's understanding the Venus star points, what it is, how to understand it, how to work with it, etc. Pentagram and so forth. And naturally, because the last time I did it, which was over a year ago, there's more that I've learned along the way, because it's something that, well, with any components of my astrological reading and learning and studying, I'm always learning something new, always growing and developing, just like you are, so there's a few more added pieces that I'm going to be adding to this particular webinar. So if you're interested, just shoot me an email, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Love and star blessings and happy new moon. Bye for now.